Welcome to Season 3 of The Spiritually Curious Therapist, the podcast for mental health professionals, healers, and seekers who believe that true healing happens at the intersection of psychotherapy, nervous system science, and holistic body-centered wisdom. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, licensed therapist, Reiki master and teacher, and all-around consciousness guide. I'm here to explore how we integrate the clinical with the intuitive, the evidence-based with the energetic, and the psychological with the soulful. Each week, we will dive into practices, frameworks, and conversations that support deep healing, both for ourselves and the people we serve. And just a quick note, while I'm a licensed therapist, this podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only and is not a substitute for therapy. So let's get curious about the body, the nervous system, the heart, and the wisdom that lives within it all. All right, so welcome back to a new episode of the Spiritually Curious Therapist. Today we have Chris Hancock. Chris is a licensed therapist and practiced for 26 years. He's based in Nashville, Tennessee. He received his MSW at NYU and worked in various community mental health and substance abuse treatment settings before setting out on his own in 2006. After more than a decade of mostly conventional psychodynamic relational talk therapy, an insidious burnout meets dark night of the soul comes spiritual awakening, touching down in 2018, set him off on the path of surrender, gnosis, mysticism, and the transpersonal experiential path in his work. I'm really excited to talk with Chris today because he has since developed a direct and ever-evolving relationship with a multitude of divine sources of love, light, and God consciousness, most recently welcoming Mother Mary as his right-hand woman. Now functioning as an initiate of unified divine feminine, divine masculine hierarchies and an instrument of divine will in action, Chris co-created a trans-dimensional, purely source-guided healing modality he calls multidimensional divine light transmission, and combines the same connection to higher sources with his long-held fascination with multiplicity and IFS as a shamanic-based therapy model and natural spiritual portal. The result is an alchemical, mystical application he calls transpersonal IFS, which I'm also really excited to hear about. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jody. Great to be with you. Boy, was that well written. Did you write that?
I did not write that. It is really well written. It's a lot. So I'm really excited to jump in and hear all about your story and who you are, right? And how this experience, this dark night of the soul experience, really transformed the way that not only you show up in the world, but the way that you do your work and even your sense of self in this like a bigger picture of the 3D world and where you stand in relationship to the process of healing and growing and transformation. Because I feel like we're in a time right now that there's a lot of transformation happening. And there are some of us, I think, who are really destined to lead the way. And I'm wondering if also that's part of your experience as well as you've kind of transversed this course.
Yeah, absolutely. Love all that. And I agree that that's kind of what seems to be happening in the world, the collective at large. The one thing you just said there that kind of jumped out at me was that many of us or those of us called to lead the way. What I really feel for me is really co-lead the way.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean, I think you understand already for that, for me, really means this co-partnership that I'm infinitely blessed to be in with higher sources, Mother Mary being kind of the main one, number one, but with a multitude, kind of like the bio said, that began to emerge out of the sort of grand finale touchdown of what I, late in the game realized was a real true dark night of the soul. So we're talking around 2018, 17 into 18, 18 just into 19 was the sort of the real touchdown point where I was, after just a long kind of insidious, just exhaustion, burnout, overworking, you know, health issues that were, not serious enough that they were easy to just kind of overlook or throw band-aids at, in addition to just big, big life changes. For example, the biggest being my wife and I deciding to adopt two children internationally. And as anyone who knows anything about that kind of process knows, it's long and grueling and full of pitfalls and difficulties and long trips abroad and all that. So all that was going on from about 2009 to 2012 when we brought our girls home. All that to say that all of this just sort of chipped away, took a toll, and brought me to a point where as I've said it many times, and it's true, really to like the edge of madness,
Mm.
where I could not see the forest for the trees anymore. I didn't know what was what. Like, was my marriage over? Was this career over? It got real dark and pretty scary at points, and grateful for it all now because of where it led. But I guess all that to say, at least for now, unless you want to unpack it further, is that that touchdown was necessary. It was kind of the necessary suffering, and really to be brought to that edge of madness, to be brought to my literal and proverbial knees to the point where I knew there's nothing left to do but complete surrender.
Mm.
There's no other answer to this, right?
Yeah,
So I had a lot of support. I always have mentor, therapist, family, friend. So I was not alone in this, but what I was going through was utterly subjective. Of course, universal also, right? A dark night of the soul is a universal. It's not a new concept or didn't start with me, but the way one experiences it is highly idiosyncratic and subjective, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, to your own everything about you. So, but, having been, even though I was practicing from the late 90s up to that point around 2018, more or less conventionally, relationally, psychodynamic, and doing it kind of the old puritanical way of showing up earlier, staying later, seeing everyone with a pulse, doing long-term therapy groups at night for years and years, all of that led to the burnout piece of it. But with that said, since high school, I've been spiritually curious, right? So
Yep.
there's nothing really new to that. I've always been a metaphysical seeker, student, reader, explorer to whatever degree, going in and out of it through the sectors of my life from adolescence all the way through deciding to basically go to grad school. So so that's why when it hit that point of basically the edge of madness, I really knew there's something much more going on here than just being burned out on doing therapy. So I knew that the only answer was to, as St. Francis of Assisi said, go within or go without, right? So I fully committed to that path of surrender, to sitting, praying, meditating, long, long walks in the woods, and basically just try to keep it simple at that point of asking only for clarity,
Mm.
because that's what was missing most. I was so lost in the fog of all of this that I've just at least bullet point described, right? So that's at the point where after some time of maintaining that commitment to sitting, opening up, praying, meditating, asking for clarity, it started to come, and it came in ways that are difficult to describe in words and in ways that were entirely unexpected. So some examples were just the beginnings of a few very clear downloaded messages, that were giving me some clues as to at least what it wasn't, right?
Hmm.
Like I would just get a sense and something in between words and just sort of a felt sense knowing of like, no, your marriage is not over. And then pretty soon after that, there was clarity about, no, your career isn't over, but it's basically you're at a real crossroads where the way you've been doing it, that has to be retired. Like there's no further to go with that. That's why you're here at this crisis point. this crisis slash, potential awakening point, right? And so sometime later, this wasn't all at once. It was sort of like breadcrumbs of insights and wisdom and clarity. And on that trail right there, what would come later was that basically, like, the world has been waiting for you to come forth with all of who you are, with the very clear implication of I have not been fully true to myself. And I could just cut to the chase and say, for our purposes here, what that meant was that all my real, most sincere, soul based, metaphysical, mystical, spiritual inclinations, I was not leading with that. I was keeping it all behind me for the usual reasons that many people do. We're afraid of being seen as a quack. It's too taboo. We won't be able to make a living. We'll be shunned, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Guilty as charged, right? It was sort of more background, just giving into that fear and staying traditional, in my case, for too long to the point where I had to be knocked upside the head, literally, right?
The universe will do that. Well,
Right, right. That's right. I mean, if you have a true soul purpose, mission, calling, a reason why you embodied that it would be a tragedy if you were to miss it, then thankfully, spirit, the divine is gonna keep nudging you. And when you're not hearing the nudges, it's gonna give you a wallop,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
I wonder, so to that point, Chris, if I can pause you for just a moment, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about myself and a
Yeah.
lot of the listeners who may be experiencing this level of burnout or maybe even ramping up. And I'm wondering through your experience if there are any lessons learned in terms of when to start listening to that, instead of waiting all the way till you get to this point of complete annihilation. Is there a way that we can really tune in to that inner knowing,
Mm,
to those nudges, as you were saying, before
yeah.
we get knocked upside the head?
Yeah. Well, I'd say in terms of the question of when, I'd say now is a good time.
Yeah.
How about right now? What's that old, is it a Martin Luther thing about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the next best time is right now?
Is right now. I love it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
So, I had dipped in and out of meditation commitments, spiritual practices, Kriya yoga, all sorts of stuff in and out for many, many, many years. But looking back, I see I never stayed committed. I let life's manifold curveballs always just kind of pull me out of it. So I would say, yeah, cautionary tale there, right? If you got a deep knowing that you're on a spiritual path of service, service to other, loving service, to be some sort of instrument or vessel of divine will, that's how I think about where I am now. We'll
Mhm.
get to that. Yeah, pay it full attention. Give it everything, give it its due to the best of your ability and stay consistent with it until you really start to get the clarity of how is best for you and your soul to express it.
So I love what you're saying, because what just arose for me as you said that is, even if you're not quite there yet, even if you're still carrying the fear, if you're hearing the whispers,
Yeah,
stay consistent with listening, because the clarity will come, the time will come. But the thing
yeah,
to do now, it's you don't have to like take that huge leap, but it is important to stay connected and to continue to listen to what's arising within you or coming through you.
100%. That's the key, right? Be still and know that I am God, right?
Yeah.
And the kingdom of heaven is within. All the divine spark is within, and that's one of the things right there. As I hear myself say, the divine spark. That's how I think about the larger self in IFS, right?
Mhm.
And if you want to just sort of pivot into that a little bit right here.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about your experience with IFS and how have transformed the way that you practice using your version of it.
Totally. So I discovered IFS more or less accidentally, just found that first IFS book all the way back in 2006.
Mhm.
And I think I read it in 2 hours. After page one, I was hooked. I didn't know why, devoured it. And long story short, I would say I went in and out of it, dabbled with it, in and out of it, like many, many people do. Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz, he has even said this. I've seen where he said this before, that that's extremely common, that when people discover this modality, which is paradigm shifting, as probably most of your listeners are at least somewhat familiar in it, how it's so comprehensive, compassionate, non-pathologizing, etc. And the idea that we're one in many, and that we're all a multiple, right? That's what's so like explosive about it, and why there's been so much pushback on it as a model for almost 40 years or 40 years now, right? But anyway, there was something that resonated deeply with me as just aligned and representative of higher truth. And even though the early IFS literature and still a lot of the mainstream IFS literature isn't really talking about it in terms of it being a spiritual portal, they'll acknowledge that it's a shamanic based therapy. But, I think, as many have said, Dick Schwartz is mostly concerned with it being academically acceptable and all that, which I totally get, right? But I recognize something in it all the way back in 2006 as there's a real spiritual heart and core of this. And so I would go in and out of it. I think in 2007, I started signing up for interest lists for training because there were no trainings in my area. And there
Mhm.
was no telehealth training options available at that time either. And at that time, working in community mental health, I couldn't have afforded to go travel across the country, stay in a hotel, pay for the training, take time off work. It wasn't feasible. So me being me, I was not going to let that stop me. So I just kept practicing it here and there, in with my work with people, dipping in and out, reading the literature, buying each book that came out over the years, dipping in and out. And fast forward basically to 2019 when I started to really sort of that surrender experiment started, I hit pay dirt unexpectedly, right? Started to get those downloads. My body would be rocking while I would be sitting, energy moving. I mean, it was on. I knew there was something going on here. And then I was given a gift of what came to me as a gift of holy discernment was how it came to me. Literally just like boom, download one day at the end of one of those sits, where again, I was just asking for clarity and a way forward because I knew the old way was over. And that gift of holy discernment, it took me a little while to figure out what it was, but it was basically a gift from the Holy Spirit. And on the practical level, it showed up as a kind of like a built-in version of muscle testing, involuntary, where I ask a question in my mind or have a thought with intention, and literally, kind of like a pendulum, my head will bob up, yes, up and down for yes, and left and right for no.
I love it.
That simple. And it's been
Yeah.
with me ever since. I think I would have to ask for it to be removed if I wanted that. I'm not going to. It's been with me ever since. And so I started applying that during that time to make educated guesses about who or what is working with me with all this body rocking and movement. And that's when I started to realize it was figures like Saint Germain, Mother Mary, Melchizedek. I could go on and on. I want to pivot back to, so that began, and I just kept sitting and allowing this kind of transmutational process to take effect. There was one profound day sit where at the very end, I had a complete unitive consciousness experience. I was just like filled with the most incredible sense of bliss and love. And I think it was clearing out a lot of debris, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
I thought for the longest time that that was Saint Germain doing that, but I've since learned with this Mother Mary connection that that was Mary. I've since learned that Mary's been kind of tracking with me for a long, long, long time, all the way back to childhood. She's given
Mhm.
me examples in transmissions about that. Okay, now once again, I'm going to try to pivot back to, so with all of that coming on, I developed a sort of smorgasbord of an energy psychology method, which is pretty neat that I still do. And and then I don't really remember how, maybe 2020, it just sort of occurred to me that why am I not picking back up IFS here? So I don't know if it was divinely inspired or synchronicity. I don't know what, but I started picking back up with that. And then before too long of doing that, which was just perfectly timing and alignment, and I had more and more people responding positively to it, coming to me for it, which I also think accords with where we are in the consciousness, the collective, more openness to the idea of we're all have parts and we're multiple and we have an eternal divine essence within us, right? There's more acceptance, I think, collectively for this now. So then at some point, I can't even say how, but it occurred to me to basically start inviting in my connection, welcoming into the higher sources like Mary, Ascended Masters, Archangelics, other Supreme Being energies into that work. And the rest is history. So that was basically the birth of what I just call transpersonal IFS, for lack of, I don't know what else to call it, right? It really is the convergence of divine intervention with IFS, which means that sometimes it looks like more or less standard IFS, but with the higher sources that who come in, they're just holding space,
Mhm.
lending energy, lending light. Sometimes it can be that and not much more. As I think about that, that's when, like, let's just say it's Mary, who it most often is, either herself or with another divine emanation joining her. Often it's Mary just kind of holding background space, sort of her being my co-pilot.
Mhm.
And other times, depending on the infinite wisdom and the knowledge of what would be best for a person, what they're open to receive, their capacity to perceive and receive, and or where we might be in terms of the kind of classic steps of the work. So usually to the point where it looks like we're going to offer a healing ceremony or unburdening, as we say in IFS, for a part. That's when, like, for example, if Mary's there, either the client or myself, or often both of us more or less at the same time, will kind of get a sense of Mary saying, put me in, coach. I have something for this. So what that looks like in terms of the practicals for those who are IFS informed is that it at that point, in addition to offering the sort of menu of what to give up a burden or wound to, right? Fire, water, earth, sky, light, we say, or Mary, Mary's here, or the, Archangel Metatron or whatever, whoever it is. And then if the person chooses or if that part of the person says, yeah, I would like Mary, then it just then magic happens of any kind of infinite varieties of the ways that the higher sources come in to do their own version of absorbing, dissolving, transmuting the burdens or the wounds or the extreme beliefs, be it from this life, from family, culture, legacy burdens, ancestral. I mean, that's a whole developing thing with inviting in ancestral lines. There's another area where it typically does not follow some of the kind of standard IFS ancestral unburdening processes where you give it back up the line. Like Ann Cinco's got her own method. I think Kate Gardner. I'm familiar with all that, but when we're doing it this way, it's often that the ancestors are coming in to support, to also receive benefit or healing or unburdening. And if, like, again, let's just say it's Mary that's sort of taken the lead on that portion of the work, she takes it all and basically sends it on to the light.
Mm.
Yeah, that's like one fundamental difference on that piece of like ancestral work. Yeah.
So this, as I'm listening to you describe this, it sounds like an incredibly powerful, transformative experience. What
Yeah.
what is it like for you to
Mhm.
hold space for that?
Yeah. Great question. So, and the answer will, given all of what I just described, my answer usually surprises people. So here we go. I half jokingly say, I think I'm a little dense because I really honestly don't feel a lot. And I
Mhm.
feel like my role in co-facilitating IFS when we're doing it in this transpersonal or alchemical way, much like when I'm in my role doing the other process, which we'll probably talk about, the MDLT, it seems truly that my job in that, I mean, with IFS, it's more to be, working my role as an IFS co-facilitator. But in terms of the divine intervention portion, my role really literally is just to hold space, to hold my portion of the energy, because my crude understanding of kind of how this works, like quantum mechanically speaking,
Yeah.
whether it's transpersonal IFS, the MDLT process, or when I'm doing my own sits where they just come in to work with me, is that the divine emanations descend some of their energy, of course, because we could not tolerate the entirety of their presence.
Right.
They descend some portion of their energy into like a toroidal field, a spherical torus field or toroidal field of energy and light, quantum, that we don't see. People have different degrees of perceptibility of feeling that. I have some people that absolutely feel it. But for me, how I feel it is really just because my body rocks.
Mm.
And this is how it all started with me. The first indication of the somatic kind of response to what seemed to be started to happening was my head rotating in that infinity symbol,
Hmm.
which I knew right away. Oh, that's meaningful.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, that's not a nothing burger. There's something to that, right? So that's still true today. That's how it works, is when the sources come in, usually, I'm doing an invocation or invitation that at this point, frankly, I'm not even sure is necessary, but it's just part of the ritual, so I do it anyway. But even before, usually I'm not a quarter of the way through it and it's going. So I know that Mary's already here. The field is already set up, right?
Yeah.
But I do it anyway just for respect and to be clear of inviting in the entirety of the divine realm, personal guides, guardian angels, crossed over, healed, and well-loved ones and ancestors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Invite them all to hold space, lend energy, and work. Usually, I will say work behind or following whoever I know is the main source. Again, just say it's Mother Mary. I'll say behind Mother Mary's lead, right?
Mhm.
So we're not inviting all these higher sources to just come in and try to do their own thing together, which I doubt would happen anyway, but just feels like it makes sense for me to respectfully say, you know, behind Mother Mary, right? Yeah.
As you're saying all of
Yeah.
this, it's like, okay, I can totally appreciate the idea of holding space. And I love
Yeah.
the trust that
Yeah.
you have developed in the process and in these beings and in the energy.
Mhm.
How do you care for yourself in
Mm.
order to be able to do that? Because it sounds I just hold space, but we all
Yeah.
know like just holding space takes a lot of effort and skill.
Oh, for sure. Right. No, you're exactly right. I really meant that in the moment in the process when I'm co-facilitating with clients or people, that's really my role, is just simply to hold space, hold the field, right?
Yes.
And use my intuition, like Mary has been communicating with me very often lately, just always encouraging and loving, but giving gentle encouragement to, like, keep using your intuition about when it might be best for you to steer a little more and when to kind of give it to me. That's just an example. But what you're asking there is a great question. That's sort of the behind the scenes, like how are the sausages made, right?
Well, but both yeah,
Yeah,
definitely that. And
right.
you answer the question because I think, and I'm just imagining holding that space and having all of this happen and how your ego needs to take a back seat and you need to really be able to trust the process as it's happening. And
Completely.
so,
Yes. I,
yeah, but
I mean,
both.
at this point, about 7 years in, I can truly say I have complete trust in the higher sources and the process. So that part at this point is easy. It wasn't in the first few years, that's for sure. But
But
really what,
can I pause you for a second? Because I think
yeah,
that's really, really important. And I really want the listeners to really hear that, right?
yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah, a lot of doubt and struggle and trying to sharpen my discernment. There was a point early on, I don't know, in 2019 where I was still so not completely out of the darkness, and it was just too much coming on too fast. I shut it all down. With intention. I
mhm.
said, I need to take a break. I may not even be able to do this. Please let me go offline here, and I will ask for, if this is really meant for me, I will ask for a signal when the divine knows I'm a little bit more grounded, ready, balanced, and open. And that is exactly what happened.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that because I think a
Yeah.
lot of times people do become so overwhelmed and don't know what to do with it all. And the
Yeah.
idea of being able to say, you know what, I need to shut this down right now, and
Yeah.
I will come back when the divine
Right.
is I'm ready. Just giving yourself permission to do that.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let me try to pivot back to, I think, your question there about like,
Behind the scenes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the behind the scenes, right? So when I made that commitment to this kind of surrender experiment,
Mhm.
asking for clarity, and when all this started coming online, it was very clear that it was much more happening than me just sitting and praying and meditating. As that unfolded, I began a process of daily prayers and affirmations. And because of the Saint Germain connection that came on, and I was already roughly familiar with Saint Germain, just from a little dabbling and reading theosophy and ascended master type of history, tradition, literature. I did a deep dive into that and came up with a whole, like a violet flame, doing decrees and prayers and protocol that I am still doing to this day. So basically, every weekend, at least twice, and if I can get it in during the week, once, maybe twice, usually at the most, I sit, and those sits are for usually about an hour and a half. I'll sit with the prayers. I do the whole list of decrees, most of which are just like prayers for the health of the world, my
Mhm.
family, all my clients, etc. Takes about 40 minutes maybe, and then I sit. I sit just like I started in the beginning. So I've just decided I am going to continue this until I get some sign that maybe it's run its course. And I've never gotten that sign. So I sit, do decrees, do prayers, and then when that portion is done, I sit and I let whoever's going to come in and work with me. And these days it's always Mother Mary, and usually Mary and someone else. And it can be working with me on any kind of level, like on the emotional level, psychological, neurological, level of higher self, level of soul, consciousness, energetic body, physical somatic level, or even genetic DNA. I've received numerous genetic DNA activation upgrades throughout this process, and all of which I just mentioned. So have many of my clients. And
Mhm.
that's more part of the multidimensional divine light transmission, aka MDLT for short. When we engage that process, that's where we just essentially give the whole session over to whoever, whatever higher source or sources are going to come in with their infinite wisdom and knowledge about what would be best for that individual. So it's usually working on one of those levels and bringing some kind of offering of divine light, love, and healing energy. It's different every time. Different people experience it different ways. For some people, I mean, it can be everything from just feeling an unusual sense of calm, peace, and bliss on one end of the spectrum, all the way to full-on out-of-body experiences, the beginning of Kundalini arousals, after death contact experiences like miniature NDEs, psychic dismemberment type ceremonies. All sorts of stuff can happen within the context of MDLT, just inviting in the higher source and giving it carte blanche, with reverence, awe, and gratitude and trust. Yeah. So I think I got off track there with the original question, but
Well, no, it was a really great segue into,
yeah. Okay.
multidimensional divine light transmission.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how you assess for whether a client, and maybe this is just something that comes through you, but is there
Yeah.
a process through which you assess whether a client is appropriate or ready for that
Oh, yeah.
a level of intervention? Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking, wow, like what if somebody walks out and is,
Uh-huh.
has this complete like spiritual awakening and like can't get up off the floor.
Oh,
So
right.
yeah,
No, that's a
what's the
great question.
process for that? Yeah.
Okay, so it's been a learning curve process for me, that's for sure. So there's a couple elements to it, or a couple ways I can answer that. So I'll start with what I call the divine pipeline. So that's something that kind of came into effect a few years ago. And that is basically my conception of how Source, let's just say, sends me those who are most ready, open to receive, and aligned with who I am and what I have to offer, especially that which I have to offer in tandem with Mary and the other higher sources.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, what I've been in the practice now for a few years of doing is whenever someone contacts me, before I write back, I sit with it as soon as I can and I ask, and again, that's using this holy discernment, quick and dirty yes, no to start with. I ask, was this person sent? Meaning, were they sent to me through the divine pipeline?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a yes, that's kind of all I need to know. Then it's a go. If it's a no, my next question is, because I've learned this somehow, I don't know how I quite figured it out, to ask, okay, they weren't sent, were they otherwise magnetically attracted somehow?
I love that.
Okay, so if it's a yes, it's also a go, but there'll be further discernment for me about what to introduce them to, also based on what they're going to tell me, they're why they're coming to me, right? Okay. And if it's a no on sent, then it's a no. It simply means this is not the right fit or the right time for us to make this connection. And I can say at this point, again, 7 years in, I think I can think of maybe in this last year, maybe two people that emailed me that it seemed to be kind of random. It would seem clear to me like they really didn't kind of know what I do. They didn't really look through website clearly or whatever. And it was
Mm-hmm.
right away, no,
Mm-hmm.
meaning they're not sent and there's not an alignment here, right? So it's usually pretty obvious. But that means that the vast, vast majority of the time, I'm getting inquiries from people who are sent or magnetically aligned. So it's gotten a lot easier. And I really think a lot of work is put in on the other side of selecting in and nudging through and helping to refine and prepare people to kind of pull the trigger on trying some work with me because I think, well, no, I don't think I know from the many Mary transmissions that she is as overjoyed with this partnership as me, and she wants it to be a good fit and wants it to attract those who are most ready and open. Of course, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm smiling to myself as I'm listening to you because I was like, you have like the optimal referral source.
That is indeed true. Yes.
It's
Yes.
like-
Yes. Yes, it's right. Which
it
I'll
can't
say
get better
this.
than that.
It doesn't mean I'm always like booked and overbooked. It doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, there was a point, I don't know, 2 years ago where I had a long wait list, and I don't even know how that happened. But that's not the case now. I think I have one, maybe two openings right now. But I also have a lot of people that come in just for one-offs or
Yeah.
consults. So I have a mixed bag. Whereas in the old iteration of what I did, it was just all therapy clients all the time, every week, that kind of old model. Now it's a whole smattering of consultation, one-offs for MDLT, and then people who come to work with me regularly, but on every different frequency kind of level you could imagine.
Well,
Yeah.
that was my other question as I'm listening to you is wondering
Yeah.
what do people typically come to you for? Like what are people
Yeah.
typically asking for or needing support with?
Yeah, it's mainly, it's mostly at least the spiritual curious, if not those who are full on immersed in some kind of healing, coaching, or spiritual life. And it's often the ones who are, they've hit a wall somewhere.
Mm,
Or maybe it's that they've realized that their empathy is too porous and they're taking on too much, or they're aware, if they're at all sort of hip to the idea of multiplicity in parts, they're really realizing that they got a nasty inner critic that they can't deal with alone,
mm,
or that they've hit a point in what they're doing in their spiritual growth and or their work with their own clients or whatever, that they're being made aware that there's probably some young parts still really holding some old, deep and profound pain that you can't do alone, right? So that's just sort of an example. So most people these days come to me for those two experiential processes, the transpersonal IFS or the MDLT. And a lot of people who see me regularly these days, we toggle back and forth using higher guidance and
mhm.
intuition about what would be best to what lens to work through at any given time. I'd say, yeah, and that's wonderful because those are the two things I enjoy doing most because I think they're the most powerful and potent and best bang for the buck.
Yeah, and what you offer is this experience of people really being able to connect, it sounds like, not only with themselves, but with this higher guidance that they may not have otherwise be able to do. So,
Oh, exactly.
yeah.
I mean, to me, that's almost the best part is being able to facilitate or co-facilitate a direct connection with a divine emanation, right? Like Mary or an angelic or ascended master. And it's never accidental who comes through. I'll give one quick example of a person that I've been working with like forever, who's followed me through every iteration. And, it's kind of rare, but here we are, who's someone that I attempted to take inside to do inner work a few different times through the years, through the decades, but just too keyed up, dysregulated, it just couldn't happen. And I wasn't prepared. I wasn't skilled and ready, and I was still not where I needed to be. So fast forward to fairly recently, we did a couple of MDLT sessions because this person was really curious about that. And this is fairly rare. It's only happened with maybe two other people, but it was Yeshua, Jesus
Mm,
energy
mm,
coming through for this person multiple times. This is someone who would identify as conventionally Christian, liberally, not fundamentalist or fire and brimstone, Presbyterian, I think, with a very heartfelt connection to Jesus, to Yeshua, not to Mary, funny enough, right, at all. And now Mary comes through all the time for her and for us. But in the Yeshua Jesus energy coming through, what I was able to glean, and so was she eventually after a couple sessions, what was that he was coming through largely in some imperceptible way to prepare her system to be able to tolerate the deeper work, the
mm.
deep healing, depth therapy, IFS work that we were never able to do in the past. He came in and set the stage to help make it possible. And then once we tried doing some IFS transpersonally, it's Mary every time. And that work is like on steroids now with this individual that if you had asked me, I would have thought probably is the least likely person to be able to do that kind of work or me with her. But here we are, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you notice about folks do who come to you but also have some resistance around
Yeah.
these processes, or even
Hmm.
even as I say that out loud, what's showing up for me is because I know this
Yeah.
happens to me, is like the questioning of it. Like,
Yeah.
what's really happening here? Do I really believe this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, everyone has that to some degree or another, right?
Yeah.
I still even have a part of me that I've gotten to know very well through this that, will chime in every now and again and basically want to just say this is all bullshit. You're delusional, none of this is real, right? it's pretty quiet. It doesn't plague me at all, but it's still there, and that part's not going to give it up. So I understand that. We're simpatico at this point. But yes, so really to try to answer that specifically, because that's a great question, Jody, is it depends on the degree and the intensity of that which you're calling the resistance or the doubt, or especially if it's fear. So the more it seems to have the energy of fear, the more I don't really touch it. I just say, why don't we work on in a more conventional way? Why don't we really do some narrative work? Let's unpack more of what I may not know about what generated it. It's often coming from kind of religious, dogmatic teaching, whether it's that's more cultural or familial or direct from a person's experience with being involved in conventional, usually Christian. I'm in the buckle of the Bible Belt down here, so I get a lot of people who come to me that have already sort of kind of left the conventional religious frameworks, or even sometimes full-on cults or cult-like systems into their communities. Usually people find their way to me once they realize they don't want to throw the whole baby out with the water, but they need a fresh perspective on how to reconceptualize a more authentic spirituality, without walls and dogma, right? So again, I'm trying to get back to the question. If a lot of it is more fearful based on old taboos and teachings, then we got to just address that before we try to just open it up to higher beings coming in and working their magic, right?
Yeah.
So as long as the person is open to that and they're patient and they're willing to work with that, then I just trust that when it's time to open up, we'll know it. We'll know it, right? So, but if somebody contacts me, let's say, because they're curious or interested in the MDLT process, I make sure they read the entire page on my site because I went to great pains to cover every single possible base. And I say down near the bottom of a whole section about, these are basically the three big rule outs for why it's probably not the thing for you to do, or at least not right now. And one of those is all about basically if you are just, in inner conflict with doubt, fear, taboos, if a lot of that comes from religious trauma, then let's not just launch right into this because it would probably dysregulate the hell out of you. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of discernment has to go on behind the scenes, but I also use my guidance on that too, right? Is, what would be in the highest and best good. In fact, that's a daily practice for me now, along with prayers and affirmations and setting the stage for my day and my work each and every day is when I'm ready, I'll sit down and look at the list of who I'm seeing that day.
Mhm.
And I'll be asking Mary and the sources in general, my higher guidance, name each person what's in the view of the higher sources, what's in the highest and best good for today for that person. Right. And it's usually what I would think. Sometimes I'm surprised. And oftentimes when I'm surprised is because it's then that person comes in with something that just came up that they just need to process. Whereas otherwise we might have been going back into one of the other experiential processes. So there's just an inherent wisdom in it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating the way that you describe this, and I just want to say, and I'm curious if this transfers to our listeners, because even in sitting with you and listening to you, there is just this overall sense of safety and gentleness in you trying to think of how to even describe what it feels like
Yeah.
somatically, right? Like
Hmm.
it's like, oh, yeah, I could totally lean into this.
Oh,
And so
cool.
what's interesting is what I'm realizing as you're talking about all of this is that it's not just by accident, right? Like you put a
Yeah.
lot of intention and a lot of work into creating that space and that energy and that way of being in the world. And
Oh, there's no doubt.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's my life. It's my whole life now. This is my sole purpose and mission.
Mhm.
And I've had that confirmed through numerous correspondences, telepathic transmissions, experiments that I've been running this past year. that are all making it abundantly clear I mean, to basically sum it all up is like, you figured it out. Congratulations. Now just keep going. And yeah. And what I often also get on that kind of note from Mary in the daily transmissions, about every third one, she reminds me, and I remind you again, my dear, we're only still just getting started.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But no, you're right. Absolutely. None of this is accidental or arbitrary or haphazard. There's a lot of energy. This is really my whole life, in addition to my family. And
Sure.
it's not all I do, but it's the vast majority of what I do. And I really am happy to say, because I couldn't say this for the majority of my career or my life thus far, I am at more peace than by far than I have ever been. And, that reminds me of one of my kind of jokes here is that, if the devil and his minions are pulling one over on me, they're really failing because I've never been happier, more at peace, more balanced, more in alignment, or they're playing a long game, you know?
You're playing along.
Yeah. But, I just, I don't, that's not what's happening here. I'm still in awe and amazed at what's happening. And I would never say I understand it all because it's not possible to. Much of this is incomprehensible, but it's, one of the main messages too in the transmissions all throughout and still is that everything basically rests on trust, faith, and patience. Like
Yeah.
those are the big three: trust, faith, and patience.
Patience.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's so important. And I just want to circle back again because I think it's just
Yeah.
such an important piece of the work that you're doing in terms of ethics and showing up in your truth.
Yeah.
And that this work, this is powerful transformational work. And in
Yeah.
order to do it in an ethical, safe way, we really have to do our own work
Yeah.
and prepare our instrument, which is us,
Yes.
so that we can
Yeah.
hold space in that way. And that includes everything that you've talked about in terms of discernment. And that was going to be one of my questions, but I think you may have
Yeah.
already answered it. When do you shift into more of the conventional way
Yeah.
of doing therapy versus, bringing in these energies and opening
Yeah.
things up? I think for the audience and for those who are bringing holistic and spiritual and metaphysical practices into their work, and I've been a part of a lot of conversations in which this is talked about, like how do we do it in an ethical, safe
Yeah.
manner? And we can get our consents together, we can have our conversations, we can do all the trainings, but if we are not centering ourselves
Yeah.
and doing our own work, none of that really matters.
Oh, 100%. Right. Then we're missing a big, big important piece. I'll tell you this, I'm very fortunate that back before I even started applying to grad schools in the late 90s, I got into therapy at that point for the second or third time. I think I started my therapy journey at like 24. I'm 55 now. And I started with the therapist who is now completely my mentor and I'm still with
Mhm.
back in, I think, 1997. And, he's someone who was a former Franciscan priest who had
Mm,
left the priesthood, became a social worker, became a therapist, and really ahead of his time in some ways in terms of getting into bringing shamanic practice into his work, conventional outpatient therapist, but doing some really cutting edge stuff back then, got deep into Ericksonian hypnosis. And he has been a model for me on every single level as a man, as a therapist, etc. But one of the ways that he was a model for me was from the very beginning, first with giving me when I was very insecurely kind of trying to tell him, I think I might want to do work, kind of like this, definitely looking for some sign of approval.
mhm,
He gave it. I mean, without skipping a beat, I'll never forget him saying, and I think you'd be great at it.
mhm.
And then it was a however, not a, it wasn't a but, it was a sort of a but also understand that the most important element of it is your own work. don't ever forget that.
Yeah.
And I never have. And I've been with them ever since, working in all sorts of different ways, right? And so it's given me a good smattering of ways to experience experiential approaches and just the holding container and the mentorship that it's ultimately become. Would never trade it. And I give the same message to younger, newer people that are also saying the same thing to me. I think I might want to be a coach or a counselor, or what do you think? You know, that's where it starts, right? Again, like St. Francis of Assisi famously said, go within or go without, right? It is all an inside job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so along those lines, if you, this is a big question, but given all of the experiences that you've had, starting at the beginning, having your own therapy experience, working in community mental health, all the way through your burnout and where you
Yeah.
are now, if you could course correct the mental health system to prioritize soul-led emergence,
Mm.
what one change would you champion?
Well, I bet you know what my first answer would be. Let's toss out the DSM. Let's toss it in the dumpster and burn that bitch, right?
I'm with you on that one. I like
Yeah,
match.
yeah, yeah. So, that's not so radical, I think, for people that are like-minded like us, holistic. We see that while there is a place for it, I suppose there's certainly a place for medication and more extreme interventions at times.
Mhm,
The biomedical security state, the pharmaceutical fictions that underlie what's called mental illness and mental disorders. I think it's like we can't get past go in the way that you mean it unless all of that is at least constantly questioned, if not abandoned. Start over. I'm not sure that's going to happen, at least in my lifetime, but I'm hopeful. But I suppose the workaround is that if that influence is always going to exist and be there, maybe if enough of us basically just say no thanks and keep carving new paths, like you
mhm,
say, soul-led, heart-centered, right? I mean, certainly this third wave of psychedelic therapy and consciousness is one way that we're just moving the needle out of that old paradigm, right?
yeah.
Now, that movement has its problems for sure, and probably always will. But that would be the main thing. And I guess beyond that, maybe on the more like everything's an inside job, it's person by person. I don't know. How can we all listen harder to that whisper of our soul, as I think you put it before? I love that. And wake up sooner. And I think that largely also begins by having the courage to question everything we're taught, right? I think we're all seeing that, in pretty clear light now. All the world's a stage, as Shakespeare said, right?
Could not be more true.
Right, right. Especially post 2020, post 2020 world, this brave, new Orwellian post-truth world that we're living in.
Mhm.
I think it's given a lot of people much more courage and discernment to really question everything. So that should be everything we're taught about everything, including about what it means to be, quote, mentally unwell or
Yes,
really ill. And really, is human suffering a disorder? Really? Is it? How so? Right? Those types of questions, of course.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And I think the idea that we should medicate away or push away human suffering
yeah,
rather than slow down and listen to it has
right.
really done a huge disservice to us as just
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. Yes, as humans and as a collective, indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And especially I'll be curious to see, as you said, post 2020, post COVID,
Yeah.
we're really seeing, I'm really seeing some changes. And the interesting thing is I had a colleague who, and I never thought to do this, but I've now added it, who one of the things that she asks everybody new coming in is, what was your pandemic experience? Because
Oh, interesting.
I'm like, That's such a great question," because for some people, it was life went on pretty much. But for some people, there were not only losses of life, but also
Yes.
losses of, jobs and social interactions. And some people, had to be quarantined for 2 weeks in another country where they didn't know anybody, or in their first year of college and they're stuck in a hotel for 2 weeks by themselves. And there's just, everyone has had such tremendous experiences, and we tend to just oh, that was then. And but we're seeing the fallout.
You're absolutely right. I have not thought about it that way. I've
Yeah.
certainly not thought about making that a direct intentional inquiry. I think I've been default just sort of waiting to see if it comes up.
Yeah, me
And
too.
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but everyone lived through it.
Right,
So, yeah,
right. And people don't think to necessarily talk about their experience because everyone had the experience. And
right.
I just think it's such an important thing to think about, not
Yeah.
to mention the impact on our physiology that we still don't know whether the virus, or we're seeing
That's right.
more and more people with autoimmune disorders and
Oh,
fibromyalgia
completely.
and inflammation, which
Yes.
I think is totally related. And so this
Yeah.
shift to really looking at the whole person physiologically, spiritually, emotionally, cognitively is so important.
Excellent point. Yeah. Tell your colleague that gave you that idea. Nice work there.
Yeah.
How was your pandemic experience? I love that. I'm stealing that. Yeah.
Awesome. So I have one more big question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Is there something that you wish more people asked you about the work that you do?
Huh. I've never been asked that. Is there something I wished more people asked me? I, I don't think so because so it's really polarized,
Hmm.
meaning people like you already have a knowing because you're in this same wheelhouse. You know what to ask. So I just sort of trust that there's a flow to it and there's usually not big surprises. And then to the complete other end of the spectrum, it's people that don't even know anything about mental health or therapy world that if they ask what I do, you know, thinking about what I do these days, I'll typically just give a generic answer
Mm.
because I know that there's probably we're not on the same frequency. And I don't want to have to try to spend 2 hours explaining it and watch their eyes glaze over. And we've just wasted all our time, right? So I guess the answer is not really. I'm happy with with how it just unfolds. I put a lot. So one of those early messages that I got, in 2018 with the sitting experiment was that so this was sort of in line with the world has been waiting for you to come forth with all of who you are. It was kind of extension message of that where I was being told that yeah, you're at this clear crossroads. It's not an accident. And if you choose to go this new direction, basically put it all out there,
Mm.
all of it, like, in my own way, authentically follow your intuition, but do not hold back. Put it all out there and watch what happens. And the implication was you will be protected. Be guided and protected. Okay. And so I have put it all out there as pages and pages on my website. I
Mm.
Instagram a lot and I share anonymously the contents of what happens in my world and in my sessions. So when people are sent or magnetically attracted, they typically don't even have a lot to ask. They just like, can we work together? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't want to have to try to explain what this is 5 times a day. You know?
It feels like a huge weight lifts from my chest when you say that, because
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
yeah, because I often find myself trying, over explaining as
Yeah.
a way of not necessarily convincing people, but
Sure.
wanting people to get it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, you could look at my website as a gigantic over explain. That's for sure. But I love to write, and I figure I'm going to take that cue and put it all there.
You
And
know,
yeah,
I really love that because you do, and we'll put your website in the show notes, and I'll have you share in a minute all the ways in which people can contact you. But your website is very extensive, and there is a lot of information on there. So I definitely recommend for folks whose curiosity have been piqued by this conversation to
yeah,
visit there. And there is just so much information about who you are and what you do, and explaining all of these different ways in which you show up, and it's very inspirational. What's your Instagram handle?
oh, it's just my business. It's at Therapy Outside the Box.
At Therapy Outside the Box.
Yeah,
Okay. Your website is therapyoutsidethebox.com,
that
correct?
is it. That is it. Funny, quick little story about the name is that sometime in, I don't know, late 2019, early 2020, when it was clear that I needed to kind of, as they say, rebrand, right? Because I was really tossing out pretty much everything and starting fresh. My wife just spit out that name,
Mm,
just intuitively. How about Therapy Outside the Box? We're like, whoa, there's no way that's not taken. So then we hop online and do the URL searches or whatever, and it was not taken. So I grabbed it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I bet I've even had two people, one who I work with now regularly, who found me because they went looking to have that name as a business name.
Really.
Yes, since then.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. So,
I love the
yeah,
way the universe works.
no doubt. No doubt.
Is there any last thing that you would like to share?
Not that I can think of. I just want to thank you for having what a great, I mean, the Spiritually Curious podcast. What an incredible name. I'm surprised that wasn't taken.
I'm surprised too.
Yeah, but you are a lovely host. I love your energy. We had never interacted before. The listeners should know. Never, not
No,
once.
no. And you found me through like ChatGPT or something, you said, right?
Believe it or not, I did. I started experimenting with that a little bit. And I think again, my wife said, "Why don't you ask it what podcast would be most aligned with what you're doing?" And you were the second one that popped up.
I love it.
Yeah. So
Thank
chat
you,
knows
Chat.
all about you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It has been wonderful spending time with you and learning about you and all the ways in which you show up in the universe, and the work that you're doing. And your journey is incredibly inspirational. And, I think more than anything, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, the sense of just like safety and confidence. It's more than confidence, but I don't even know if there's a better word in my vocabulary to describe it,
Yeah.
is like in the work that you're doing and in your field is so reassuring to me as somebody who is spiritually curious and bringing these holistic practices in. And constantly I also have that part that's like, Jody, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
this real,
Right.
is this bullshit? Is this okay? What are people going
Yeah.
to think of you? And
Right.
really be, and I know a lot of my listeners have the same experience and struggle. And so,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of conditioning that we all have to overcome if we're going to go left of center, outside the box. We're going to expand into who we truly are.
yeah.
Maybe I do have an answer to that question. The last thing I would say, since I'm reminded that you said most of your listeners are therapists or in the kind of general field, is, I've had a few people usually on Instagram, respond to a post or something, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I left the field because I thought I couldn't do all my weird shit."
Yep.
And I would say, yeah, I wasn't sure I could either, but one way or another, here I am. So if I'm nothing else, I'm living proof that you can. There is a way to bring it all forth, and do it all ethically, to the degree that you feel ready. I wouldn't force it, let it unfold. So again, it's back to faith, trust, patience, and forge ahead, soldier.
Well, thank you again so much. This has been
Thank you,
lovely.
Jody. Thank you for a great time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today on the Spiritually Curious Therapist. I hope something in this conversation sparked insight, inspiration, or even a little soul-level curiosity. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love it if you would take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone you know who's walking the healing path. You can connect with me more deeply over on Instagram at Holistic Heart Healing, or visit Therachi.com and JourneyWithKindredSouls.com for upcoming courses, healing sessions, and more ways to journey together. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep following the wisdom of your heart.